To me, this region is the top of the whole world, the land of sky people. It is a land of cold, rushing rivers, small creeks, deep gorges, dark timber, and waterfalls. Great billowing clouds sail upon the mountains, and in early morning, a blue-gray mist hangs just about the treetops. Traveler Bird, Cherokee author and storyteller.
The Appalachian Mountains are among the oldest mountain ranges in the world. Once as tall as the Rockies, they've been shaped over millennia by erosion into their current form. Within this vast range, the Blue Ridge Mountains stretch from Georgia to Pennsylvania. Their varied climate fostered exceptional biodiversity, creating a natural refuge for plant and animal life. And around 12,000 years ago, an ideal home for human settlement.
So for much of the time that predate European presence in the high country, people lived in small hamlets or base camps, perhaps that they were visiting seasonally. They probably were coming back to the same places year after year because this was their home, even if they weren't occupying it 100% of the time. We have other periods of the pre-contact era where people are living here full time. They are farming, they are taking advantage of the topography, of the landscape, of the resources, and figuring out ways to map their own communities onto it. At the time of European contact, you had the ancestors of the modern-day Cherokee in the area. You had ancestors of the Catawba or other Siouan-speaking tribes. We have records of the Shawnee. And one of the artifacts that we start to find once people settle down is pottery. And you can find the impressions of people's hands, the potter who made that. And that's such a visceral connection that we can have to bridge the past and the present. But you could not ignore the early periods of contact were incredibly disruptive. Communities were deeply impacted by European diseases, by violence, and as a result, communities that once had their own identities and histories began to coalesce for defense and survival.
As the United States expanded westward in the early 19th century, white colonists continued a long campaign of terror against indigenous communities across the Southeast, taking native land for settlement, agriculture, and slavery with the support of the U.S. government. Indigenous tribes were driven from their homelands. By the 1790s, European settlers had begun establishing homesteads in what would later become Blowing Rock. Among them was Edmund Green and his family, who built their home along Highway 321, where the Green Park Inn now stands. Other families, including the Bullock, Story, Hayes, and Coffey, soon followed. Appalachia became a confluence of cultures, with immigrants from England and Eastern Europe working alongside freed and enslaved African Americans in the lumber, coal, and iron camps of the 19th and 20th centuries. But in the town of Blowing Rock, a different industry began to emerge.
Blowing Rock, from the very beginning, has this very interesting outward look. It's very purposeful in looking to people off the mountain. It started out, in a lot of ways, from Lenoir, which is about 20 miles south of Blowing Rock and about 20 degrees hotter than Blowing Rock. And in 1845, James Harper petitioned the North Carolina Senate to build a toll road, the Lenoir-Blowing Rock Toll Road. And then in 1856, he built the first summer home in Blowing Rock. And I think he was the one to first realize the potential of Blowing Rock being a resort community.
In 1847, construction began on the Lenoir-Blowing Rock Turnpike. This vital artery follows the current route of US 321. Construction required hundreds of free and enslaved laborers. The turnpike was finally completed in the 1880s. Back then, travelers could pay $2.50 for a not-so-pleasant carriage ride.
Roads from down the mountain, would be Lenoir and Hickory, were just mud roads. They were not much. As they improved, more people began to come.
It's in the 1870s and 1880s that a number of boarding houses began to be built in Blowing Rock. They are capitalized by these Lenore businessmen who see the way forward for the South after the Civil War is an industry. They also see a new industry, the tourist industry. In the 1890s, you also begin to get very wealthy industrialists who decide to make this a permanent summer residence, like most famously Moses Cone, who purchased close to 4,000 acres in Blowing Rock beginning around the 1890s, and he began the construction of his mansion in the mountains, as he liked to call it, in 1892, and he will work on that through the early 1900s.
Blowing Rock was officially chartered on March 11, 1889. At the time, roughly 300 people called the town home, most making a living farming potatoes, cabbage, and livestock, while a small but growing number worked in the emerging tourism industry. The town's first mayor, Uncle Joe Clark, a Confederate veteran from Lenore, quickly became a local legend. Known for his eccentric ways, Clark once drunkenly herded cattle down Main Street in the early morning hours, declaring the town was far too quiet. Yet ever the law-abiding official, he promptly fined himself $1 for the disturbance.
Going back to Shell's Mill, I'm gonna get me some biscuits brown.
Like many parts of Appalachia, the timber industry entered Watauga County with the railroad in the early 1900s. The Whiting Lumber Company lobbied for the East Tennessee and Western North Carolina Railroad to extend its line to Shoals Mills to transport lumber to bigger markets in Johnson City, Tennessee.
Advent of the railroad was an important part of the development of this entire area.
We've got to keep that train running. Are you keeping?
Tweetsie Railroad that came from the Tennessee side. It went up through Cranberry over in Avery County, and then ultimately up to what is today Linville, and from Linville across the backside of Grandfather Mountain and down to Shoals Mills.
I'm going where I can hear old Whiting clog train squall.
The E.T. and W&C Railroad was destroyed in the flood of 1940 and then abandoned in 1941. Engine number 12 that once rode the rails from Boone to Johnson City is still a part of Watauga County at North Carolina's first theme park, Tweetsie Railroad. Blowing Rock attracted people across the country from urban centers, offering an escape from industrial life. And with the new influx of visitors, a community of workers began to grow.
There were large hotels built in the 1890s and 1900s, and almost all those hotels employed African Americans. And then families would bring servants from their own area. So people coming from Atlanta or from Baltimore, for example, would bring their own people who worked for them, and most of them were African American.
As Blowing Rock's tourism industry grew, so did a small year-round black community of farmers and laborers. Under Jim Crow, as safe worship spaces were scarce, black congregants held Sunday night services in a room at Rumpel Memorial Presbyterian Church, but only when white congregants were not present. By 1949, the Blowing Rock Negro Community Church opened its doors on Possum Hollow Road, providing black residents with a dedicated gathering spot until its closure in 1980. The building still stands today, now the First Independent Baptist Church.
You know, it attracted all types of people. The Cones were Jewish, for example. Another person who came to the area was Vera Lockman, who was also Jewish. She was a refugee from Nazi Germany, and she built a boys' camp just outside of Blowing Rock. That camp was set up for young boys to come down, particularly from New York, who were refugees as well. That camp ran between 1944 and 1973, and during that time, it was one of the first camps to integrate. Vera and she had a partner, Tui, so they were lesbians living near the outskirts of Blowing Rock. So to me, it represents sort of how there was this diversity, yet oftentimes people don't recognize it in Appalachia.
With the expansion of industry in the late 19th century, United States cities grew at a dramatic rate. Noise, traffic jams, slums, air pollution, sanitation, and health problems became commonplace. Originally from North Carolina, American painter Elliot Dangerfield was living and working in New York City, and in 1886, Dangerfield traveled to Blowing Rock with the hope that the mild climate would alleviate diphtheria. But he found more than just a place to recover his health. He found a place that would be his summer home every year until his passing in 1932.
Grandfather's had his studio in New York, and they lived in New York from September through mid-May, and then they would come to Blowing Rock and spend the summers here and have a wonderful time. The sense of light was something very important to Grandfather, and how light entered a picture and what it did to the subjects. And he was very aware that the light sometimes is a good deal different here in Blowing Rock than it is down country. It said that his paintings and the mountains were always glowing, never glaring.
You have the natural beauty, but then when you see Grandfather Mountain, I mean, you know it's been there for millions of years. And there's a permanence. The expressions through the changes in the weather and sunrise and sunset, there's a timeless, ageless quality about mountains that are here.
Dangerfield built 3 homes in Blowing Rock. The first is Edgewood Cottage that hosts artists in residence. The second, called Wynwood, and the last is Westglow, which is open today as a boutique luxury resort and spa. Dangerfield's presence in Blowing Rock encouraged subsequent generations of artists who traveled to and made Blowing Rock home. A small artist colony developed in the mid-20th century, just south of Westglow, along the Artists' Alley. Artists like Minerva Walker Goldsmith, John Brady, Philip Moose, Herb Cohen, Jose Fumero, Frank Sherrill, and Lynn Jenkins are known to many in western North Carolina.
Artists' Alley was a group of artists, all had year-round homes, about 2.5 miles from Blowing Rock. And it was a wonderful place to be an artist because you had the support of other artists. So there were potters, painters, weavers, puppeteers. Growing up in early 70s here in Blowing Rock, I was not an artist yet. So I was 11 years old, and I met Herb Cohen and Jose Fumero, and Herb said he was a potter. Well, I wanted to see what that was about, and I've been a potter for 47 years.
Artists and collectors coalesced around Dangerfield's work and memory in the 1990s. At such a gathering celebrating Dangerfield, an offer of a collection of Dangerfield works inspired a group to build a museum in Blowing Rock in 2000. 12 years later, the Blowing Rock Art and History Museum opened its doors in a new 23,000 square foot building on October 1st, 2011. The museum's mission statement, Curate, Preserve, Educate, Inspire, was developed and adopted by the board in 2024. In a community of 1,450 full-time residents, Brom is a valuable cultural resource. The museum prioritizes access to arts education for all ages and abilities, both on-site and in the county. With a focus to reduce barriers for access to the arts, Brom offers free field trips and bus reimbursements for all school groups to come to the museum, as well as arts outreach in county schools and senior centers. Blowing Rock has always been a place of transformation, where nature shapes the land and people shape the community.
The Blue Ridge Mountains are a great place to live today, and they were a great place to live thousands of years ago. It provides a wealth of resources for people that they can get to know and get to steward. A lot of people do that today, and unquestionably the people who lived here before us did the same thing.
A place where history, art, and nature converge, offering something different to everyone who finds their way here.
People can come up here and get lost. Elliot Dangerfield felt that way. He thought it was not only a beautiful place to paint, but it was a beautiful place to let your spirit just go.
For me, it's a lot about the energy. And if you know the area at all, we have a gorge. And I believe that the Johns River Gorge feeds the soul.
Braun began with artists, collectors, art enthusiasts, and lovers of history who imagined a museum rooted in this place. It continues with members and donors who ensure exhibitions and programs remain free and open to all. It lives in the growing permanent collection shaped by gifts of art and by the spirit, creativity, and resilience of the High Country. We invite you to become a part of our story. Consider making a gift so that we can continue to fulfill our mission and keep the museum free to all.